Rowberry is a well-known Nelson actor, writer, director, storyteller who's been active in the TV scene for 20 years, beginning with Theatre Energy, and most recently with the Nelson History Theatre. For the past 4 summers, he's been working with young theatre professionals to create plays based on local history, and they're being performed outdoors in Cranbrook Park. They've told the stories of John Bradshaw, the Nelson arsonist, Robert Sproul, and the Sproul, if you're from Maine, which he was, and the Bluebell murder, John Houston, and Nelson's early pioneer, and his favorite, which will be shared today, is the great 1926 elephant stampede. This summer, he plans to create a play around the exploits and tragedy of the 54th Kootenai Battalion during World War I, and I will turn the stage over to Richard to share his experience.
Yeah, this is a story set in Cranbrook. I'm always a little ambivalent about telling a story in the West Kootenays about Cranbrook, which is not my favorite town. It's one of those towns that's in the most beautiful setting in the world. One of them, anyway, if you created a quotient based on multiplying the beauty of the setting and the homeliness of the town, then Cranbrook would definitely be in the high 90s. But in 1926, it was probably a whole lot prettier spot to be in. There certainly wasn't a strip mall there. I wish this was a West Kootenai story. It ain't. Like babies and stories can't choose where they're from. You just have to love them for what they are. So this is the great 1926 Cranbrook Elephant Stampede. It's a mostly true story, well documented in the pages of the Nelson Daily News and the Cranbrook Herald, both of which were, at least in those days, highly respected newspapers. Mention of it can also be found in the pages, contemporary editions of the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, and the Montreal Gazette. Now, to set the scene, 1926. That's over 75 years ago. Is anybody here who's alive in 1926? Not quite, eh? Were you?
I don't even really know what's old.
And you don't remember the elephant stampede, though?
Well, I was living with a come from South Africa.
So there were lots of elephant stampedes. Yeah, nothing to it. So, what's the fuss about, right? Well, this is Cranbrook, 1926. Transportation was mainly by boat and train. Movies were silent, and gay was something you wore at parties.
Still is.
In 1926, you could buy a 3-year-old Ford Roadster for $200, a new one for less than $1,000. Sugar was 7 cents a pound. A genuine 5-piece French walnut bedroom suite went for $240, no GST. A woman's silk dress cost $17.95, and a pair of BVD combination underwear set you back $1 whole. In 1926, gangsters ruled Chicago, Mussolini ruled Italy, Adolf Hitler was buying drinks in a Munich beer parlor, for anybody who'd listen. And in London, England, John Baird had just developed a machine for projecting pictures through the air, which he called television. On the silver screen, the brightest stars were Paula Negri, Lon Chaney, Douglas Fairbanks, and Rudolph Valentino. Valentino's Son of the Sheikh was the box office hit of the year. It was the first sequel. In Cranbrook, talk was of the 40-cent an hour minimum wage for lumber industry workers. Now, in the town were the 2 major employers, the Cranbrook Sash and Door Company and the CPR Tie and Timber Branch. This was big news. There was also an editorial about it saying it was a good thing that they were raising the minimum wage to 40 cents an hour because that will keep the riffraff out and the Asiatics won't be able to get the jobs. Anyway, so let's go over to the Century Cafe on Van Horn Street across from the CPR station. Look at the newspaper. Let's go to, say, July 30th, Friday. It's a weekly paper. It came out on Friday. July 30th, 1926. Anybody want to hand out a few circus flyers here? Young man, if you were Pretend that you're a newspaper boy. Hand out a few flyers all around here. Now look, this is the original ad from the Cranbrook Herald at that time. Talked about the Sells Flotto Circus, which was coming to town. Now in those days, one of the major entertainment was touring groups, touring theater companies, touring bands. The Coldstream Guards from England performed in July. And this actually, thanks. Oh, it's more out. This was actually the second circus to come to town. The Sells Flotto. It had a circuit around California, Western Canada, Western the United States, and they'd come into town. And it says, Sells Flotto Circus, the circus beautiful. And their star, at least in Cranbrook, they thought would be Poodles Hannaford, England's own, a British subject, and without a doubt the greatest riding comedian the world had ever seen. What the hell's a riding comedian? Maybe he falls off a lot. Together with the world's greatest, oh, I need my glasses. Together with the world's greatest, most spectacular, most magnificent spectacle, 1,000 people, horses, elephants, and jungle-born man-killers, including also several hundred gorgeous singing and dancing girls. Dancing girls. Okay. So, in those days, the circus was a day-long event. Of course, you had the parade in the afternoon where the clowns and the elephants and all the animals and the bareback riders would go through the center of the town. And then later at night, there'd be 2 shows under the big top. But if you were an early riser, and I spoke to a lady who was there, she was 9 years old at the time, you could go down and watch the roustabouts unload the circus train. Now, in Cranbrook at that time, the circus was in the exhibition grounds up on the bluff above the station. How many of you are familiar with the topography of Cranbrook? You drive in from Nelson, you're driving in, and to your left is the train station, and then across the tracks there's a small rise, and up there, that's where the exhibition grounds were. So the train came into a spur, and they unloaded the circus trains. Now, this particular time, there was a pretty big crowd because there'd been some news about some of the elephants escaping, or trying to escape, in both Calgary and in Edmonton. And in fact, in Edmonton, a couple of the elephants had actually made it out into the streets. The story goes that Poodles Hannaford, the riding comedian, he was following one of the elephants down the street. This fellow came up to him and he said, are you chasing that elephant? And Poodles said, nah, I'm just shoving in the sides. So anyway, the train pulls up. They start unloading the cages, lions, tigers, zebras, camels. And every time a cage comes out of the train, this huge cheer goes up in the crowd. Car horns start honking, dogs start barking. They got 6 of the elephants out of the boxcars when the canine chorus started up in earnest. Some from just a few feet away. And Tommy, the biggest of the elephants, lowered his head and charged at one of the dogs. Well, the keepers were straining the ropes, trying to hold him back. Well, that was a forlorn hope. One of them was thrown against a wall, broke 3 ribs. The other one had his foot stepped on. It was a madhouse. Once those elephants took it in mind to leave, there was no stopping him. Tommy, Tilly, Trilby, Frida, Myrtle, and the baby, Charlie Ed, took off north across the tracks and into the deep woods towards Jack Lake. And about 5 minutes later, a bunch of circus men showed up on horseback like a Wild West posse. But it was too late. Those pachyderms were long gone. And they gave rise, actually, interestingly enough, because it was a railroad society in those days, to one of the more interesting telegrams that was ever sent out of Cranbrook. To all trains west, look out for elephants on track. And advise cited to nearest telegraph office giving location. It's the biggest thing to hit Cranbrook since, it's the biggest thing ever to hit. It made the front page of practically every newspaper in North America. Well, it was the dog days, August. And, of course, all through that afternoon and into the evening, the town was in an uproar. And there were elephant sightings all over the place. Some as far away as Moy. Of course, it was a Friday night. And, in fact, there's a bunch of stories. Every time I tell this story, somebody comes up to me and says, yeah, I heard about that. In fact, you know, my uncle or my cousin or my great-grandfather or someone was, and the story it's always the same thing. I think they're all apocryphal, but maybe not. Anyway, I'll tell it anyway because it's a good story. These fellas decided that day that they were going to a hockey game in Fernie. I don't know why it's always a hockey game in Fernie. And they were driving along the road, and of course, as fellas on their way to a hockey game are wont to do, they had been drinking fairly steadily. And they were driving along, you know, and nipping at the bottle, and the guys were sort of in a slight stupor in the back. And it's getting dark, and then in the headlights, just up ahead, the guy's driving along, he sees an elephant across the road. Right? Yeah. Did you see that? Did you see that elephant? And everybody, of course, denies absolutely that they saw anything. A little while later, they're driving along with another elephant goes zipping across. So they immediately pull over, and to a man, they get out of the car and throw away their bottles, and not one of them had another drink for the rest of his life. That's the story. The last part I don't believe. Okay, so. Oh, his grandfather probably. Okay, so the first thing the circus people did was they sent off a telegram to Cheerful Gardner. He was the circus, the elephant expert for the circus. He was in Wichita, Kansas, and he immediately took an airplane to Cranbrook to be on the spot to help with the recovery of these elephants. But the plane crashed. In those days, when planes crashed, nobody got hurt. They just, you know, sort of went into a field. Anyway, he didn't get there for a couple of days. In the meantime, the circus people took a couple of camels and an elephant out to Jack Lake, another cute name, and staked them out because the elephants were used to having being bedded down with camels as their companions. I can't imagine wanting to be bedded down with a camel as a companion. The elephants seemed to like it, and it worked because before the weekend was over, 3 of the elephants, Tommy, Frida, and Trilby, had all been captured and brought back to Cranbrook, where stables had been set up for them in the arena. And in the meantime, the rest of the circus had already moved on to Slocan and then on to Seattle. So then Cheerful Gardner showed up and organized the search for the 3 missing elephants in earnest. And he hired a bunch of local native trackers because, frankly, they were the ones who were going to be able to do the job. And apparently the leading tracker was a woman by the name of Ada Williams. And her husband, can't remember his name now. Anyway, it was interesting because when I was telling a different story at the Storytelling Festival about 4 years ago, there was a Tanaka storyteller by the name of Leo Williams. And he was about 70 or so. So I said to him, you wouldn't happen to be related to Ada Williams, would you by any chance? And he said, yeah, she's my aunt. So that was really nice having that connection to this story. And Joe Pierre, also Tanaka storyteller, really good storyteller. He's, and son of Sophie Pierre, he's a great nephew, I think, of Ada. Anyway, so this leads to the story of the capture of Tilly, the This is the fourth elephant. Tilly wasn't anywhere around Jack Lake. She wandered over to Gold Creek, which is a couple of ridges away, and this was a couple of weeks later. And there's some confusion and controversy around the story of the capture of Tilly. The story appeared in the Nelson Daily News with the unfortunate headline, "Squaw Captures Elephant with Apple." And the story is that Ada had found Tilly in an orchard, an abandoned orchard around Gold Creek, and had gone up to her with an apple and singing, and had lured the elephant, and everything was peaceful, and she was right there. And then, apparently, somehow, and the story is very murky, the elephant was captured at that point by circus men. Now, I think what happened, because afterwards, the circus men absolutely denied that story was true, that Ada had done any of this. So I think probably what happened was that she had lured the elephant. There were other trackers around. They'd gone to get the circus men. And the circus men, of course, would be extremely embarrassed and made to look bad if all their efforts had gone to naught. So they rushed in, of course, and they grabbed Tilly. It probably took them about 3 hours to get her under control again. And they totally denied that anything like that had happened. So, we now have 4 elephants captured. The next part of the story is a little sadder, I'm afraid. Myrtle was the 5th elephant, and it was about 3 weeks later that she was finally spotted, and she was in pretty bad shape. She'd been shot. She'd fallen off a cliff. It was described as a 40-foot cliff, which seems fairly unlikely to me. I think it was probably more like a 6-foot cliff. And she was in very bad shape, and the nights were starting to get cold then. I think she wasn't able to eat because of her wounds, and they managed to corner her, rope her, and start bringing her out of the bush, but unfortunately she collapsed and died on the way out. And then they cut off her head and sent it off to a museum, and her feet, because in those days, of course, elephants' feet made excellent waste paper baskets. Yes, this is the sad part of the story. And somewhere out in the bush, somewhere between Gold Creek and Cranbrook, there are the remains of an elephant under the earth now, for sure. Elephant bones, minus a head and feet. And this was a sad story. Of course, newspaper men had come from all over North America to cover this story at the beginning. They kind of got tired of it by this time, and it was stale news, and most of them had gone away. The tragic death of Myrtle might very well have revived their interest and put Cranbrook once again back on the front pages of North American newspapers, except on the same day as Myrtle's death, a somewhat more prominent person died. Rudolph Valentino, the age of 31, died in a New York hospital that very same day as Myrtle's death, and of course that knocked everything else off the front page. And by the time all that story was over, Myrtle's death was stale news. So now we have 5 elephants accounted for, and there's only one left, little Charlie Ed, the baby elephant. And he was the one that lasted the longest. He was out there from the 6th of August till mid-September. As you can imagine, by that time the nights were getting pretty cold. I don't know what the average temperature is in elephant country normally. Do you happen to know? Pretty warm even at night. So that's fairly warm. So it was starting to get down into frost at nights at that time, and people were beginning to worry about Charlie Ed. And Charlie Ed was probably beginning to worry about himself, because when they finally did come across him, apparently he gave a squeal of delight and came running right up to them. And they took him off, and he became the hit of the fall fair that year. Just before they shipped him off to join the circus, he was there and everybody came and visited him. And in fact, they even renamed him. They christened him Cranbrook Ed. It was a small ceremony with the mayor and Miss Cranbrook presenting him with a bouquet of flowers, which Charlie apparently ate. And then he was shipped off, and that would appear to be that was the end of the story. And for several years after I heard this story, that was the end of the story as far as I know. But then Art Joyce, Nelson historian, gave me a newspaper article from the Nelson Daily News, 1931, so 5 years later. And the story was about how an elephant in California by the name of Charlie Ed, shows his christening didn't really stick, it was just a circus publicity stunt, I guess, was sentenced to death for killing his keeper. So he was going to be, he was going to be shot. But this does not have a sad ending, this story, because there was a California senator whose name I couldn't find in his paper article this morning. I was trying to get a name for it. So I can't tell you the name of the senator, but he was apparently an animal activist. And he appealed the sentence. He went before a judge and said, I have evidence, and he had affidavits and eyewitness reports and all this, that Charlie Ed had been mistreated by his keeper. And he got the judge to rule that that Charlie Ed had killed in self-defense. So the judge commuted the death sentence to life in the Sacramento Zoo. He should have been exiled to Africa, so Charlie Ed hopefully lived happily ever after, and that's my story.